One of the most interesting things about the crisis that we face is that we are now finding far leftists caught between a rock and a hard place, where they are going off and admitting out of their own self-interest that, Trump was right about certain things, the America First policy being among one of them. But then they have to go through and go, well, shoot, I can't agree with Trump on everything, because if I do, I lose my audience because I've been pandering to this anti-Trump or, this far left agenda for so long that fully admitting how wrong it was doesn't really work. And so here's a clip here regarding a contradiction where, he goes off and admits that Trump's initial viewpoints or policies about America First is right, but then goes off and tries to find a way to attack President Trump. So let's take a look at these two clips.
I hate to sound more like Trump than the Trump administration does, but, I'm old-fashioned, man. If we have a problem here, if we have a shortage here in our own country, in the United States of America, and you're part of the United States government, maybe take care of our own first. Just a thought.
Yes. Just take care of our own first. This is what Trump has been advocating for a very long time. This is what is the heart of the America First policy, is that, hey, before we go off and worry about all the problems that the rest of the world is facing, we should maybe try and solve the problems here at home first. It doesn't make sense. And when you have politicians on the left coming out and saying, hey, we got this homeless crisis brewing in the United States. But then, instead of doing anything about that, they go off and they send all of this extra money and aid to all these other countries to solve their homeless and starving problems, while ignoring the people here at home who are homeless, or the kids here at home who don't get enough food or nutrition for one reason or another. They go off and they acknowledge that there's a problem, but instead of actually doing anything about it, they go off and they concern themselves with the rest of the world first. And Trump came into office saying, hey, we need to put America first. We need to solve our own problems before we start dealing with the problems of the rest of the world. It's just like in the principle of personal finances. Broke, starving people can't feed other broke, starving people. That you need to fix your own financial situation first before you have the ability to be a blessing on everybody else. Now, seeing as how agreeing with Trump leaves a bitter taste in their mouth, they have to go out and try and find a way to attack Trump, such as this.
In 2017, the military identified a novel influenza disease as the most likely and significant threat, which it anticipated would lead to a shortage of ventilators, face masks, and hospital beds, per Pentagon document leaked to me. They knew. In 2017, a U.S. government report said very clearly, okay, so probably the biggest threat that we're facing is a novel coronavirus, which will leave us with shortage of ventilators, face masks, and hospital beds. They knew, and they did nothing about it. This is the equivalent of the George W. Bush memo, Bin Laden determined to attack in the United States. Remember that? Some of you might not, but there was a memo on George W. Bush's desk. Bin Laden determined to attack in the United States. And they did Dickie McGee's X.
Okay, this is one of those bad talking points because someone made some vague statement or vague claim. It's like the Nostradamus effect, right? Because Nostradamus made vague statements and was very unclear, didn't really provide any details, that when something happens and you can try and interpret it a certain way, it makes Nostradamus seem like he was a prophet, right? And so let's go through here and analyze this. The 2017 report says the threat is a pandemic and it might be some coronavirus. It doesn't give any details as far as what part of coronavirus, because coronavirus is a class of viruses. It doesn't provide any details. It doesn't provide what the type of symptoms are likely to be, and it doesn't even tell you when it's going to happen. It just says at some point in the future, some version of the coronavirus family of viruses is going to mutate and affect the human race, and we are unprepared. But of course, they say this came out in 2017, but Experts have been telling us that we have been unprepared for a pandemic since the Bush administration. So it wasn't that this was something that, Trump, had advanced knowledge of and just ignored. This has been something that's been ignored by various administrations about the risk that a pandemic would have on the United States. And when they compare it to the Bush memo, and the Bush memo about bin Laden determined to attack in the United States, guess what? That was probably a weekly memo that came out because bin Laden had been stating for years that his intentions were to attack the United States. It didn't provide any details as far as when it was going to happen, what they were going to do, how, and any of the details. It just gave a vague statement that, bin Laden is determined at some point in the future to carry out some sort of an attack on the United States. Big shocker there. And guess what? Bush probably got memos, weekly about multiple countries and entities who would love to attack within the United States. But there wasn't any actionable intelligence about any details that he could have gone off and done anything about. There wasn't any details in that. And so when we take a look at this coronavirus report and they go off and say they knew in 2017. No, they didn't. If you read the report, does it say what year it would happen? Did it say exactly how much we would need? How many ventilators, how many masks, or any of that? Did it provide any of that details? No, it just makes a claim about at some point in the future, there would be a likely pandemic. And if that happened, we would be unprepared, right? It's not like it said, hey, in 2020, an outbreak's going to happen in China and then it's going to spread across the world. It didn't provide any of that. So don't give me, they knew, junk. They didn't. But it is interesting that there are other issues in which the Democrats are admitting that Trump was right, although some of them don't actually remember what Trump has said in the past, and they don't realize that they are admitting that Trump was right. For instance, Governor Cuomo has come out and said this.
The simplicity is what makes it so tragic, frankly. Because we don't have a piece of equipment, someone's going to die. Because we don't have staff, someone's going to die. How did we get to this place in this country that we have to buy all our supplies from China? I can't get protective equipment because China is making it?
Yes. If only we had someone who's been out there for years warning about the dangers of having manufacturing located outside of the United States. If only we had somebody out there talking about the dangers of China and the unfair trade and how they've been taking advantage of us all this time. If only there was someone out there saying that we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States, maybe we wouldn't be in this problem. Oh, wait, we did. It was President Trump. Now, it was before he was president that he was already out there campaigning on this. Trump has been saying for a long time, we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Maybe you remember this.
How do you bring back jobs, American manufacturers? How do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. There are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever. And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
Yes, Trump has been talking about preventing manufacturing from leaving the United States for a long time. It's undeniable the time frame in which that video clip came from. The first presidential debate with him on stage with Hillary Clinton talking about the dangers of letting the manufacturing leave the country and how we need to stop letting manufacturers offshore their manufacturing facilities. And we are finding that, hey, Trump was right, because now we find ourselves in a situation where we are facing a crisis we don't have the manufacturing capabilities anymore to meet the challenges of this crisis, and our ability to get our protective equipment needed for our medical capacity is being delayed because it's all located in China, which can go through and determine that, hey, we don't want to provide you this equipment because we don't like the idea that you're going to hold us accountable to anything. And instead, we're going to prioritize all these other countries first. And even if they do make the protective gear for us, we notice that the supply chain, the time it takes for them to manufacture the equipment and get them shipped over here to the United States and the quantity that we need takes time. And it turns out with what manufacturing we have left in the United States, it requires different equipment in order to manufacture what we need now. And so it turns out that the equipment needed to manufacture automobiles is quite different than the equipment needed to manufacture ventilators and masks, right? Makes sense. And if we had manufacturing of these equipments here in the United States, we could have truck drivers continually shipping out in bulk quantity what is needed to what hospital. There wouldn't be all this delay. But Trump has been going off and talking about needing to bring manufacturing jobs into the United States for a long time. And as he has, how did the left react? Oh, the left mocked him and said, these are jobs of the past. They're gone and they won't come back, such as this memorable clip.
For those folks who've lost their job right now because a plant went down to Mexico, that isn't going to make you feel better. And so what we have to do is to make sure that folks are trained for the jobs that are coming in now, because some of those jobs of the past are just not going to come back. And when somebody says, like the person you just mentioned, who I'm not going to advertise for, that he's going to bring all these jobs back, well, how exactly are you going to do that? What are you going to do? There's no answer to it. He just says, well, I'm going to negotiate a better deal. Well, how exactly are you going to negotiate that? What magic wand do you have?
Yes, the Democrats went out there and mocked him, saying, these jobs are gone. They're not coming back. There's no point in even trying to talk about bringing back these manufacturing jobs. They're jobs of the past. We need to be focused on jobs of the future. And that it is impossible to even think about the idea of bringing these jobs back. But now we see that if we had listened to Trump earlier on about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, we would not be in the problem that we are in now. And when we take a look at America First policy, it's about, hey, let's take care of our own first, and only after we solved our own problems should we start engaging with the rest of the world's problems. And then we also see about the right and Donald Trump and the Republicans for years being right about the national debt. Because it turns out when you're in debt, then the further in debt you go, the less your options are for dealing with a crisis. So for instance, if we were to take a look at the national debt right now, being well over $20 trillion, like, 22, $24 trillion, after the relief package has spent, we are finding that the devaluation of our currency is affecting our ability to respond. And of course, politicians love to devalue the currency because they're like, hey, we're going to borrow, $1,000 in today's value. And then we're going to, go through inflation by printing off more money so that the purchasing power of the $1,000 we pay back with interest is going to be less than the purchasing power of the $1,000 we're spending now. Right? Which creates a problem, definitely. But they love inflation. They just don't care, the Democrats, on what inflation does to you. But let's say we have listened to the Republicans for a long time and we realize that, hey, this large national debt, it's a problem. Let's pay that down. Let's cut our spending. Let's get rid of non-essential government, services, branches, agencies, and just focus on the core of what the government is actually there for and cut our spending to only focusing on the actual responsibilities of government and take the rest of that money and pay down the national debt. Now, let's say we had done that. And let's say we had a national debt of 0 when this crisis started. Imagine what our financial ability to address the problem would be, as we would go off and talk about being able to provide economic relief to people who are not working because the government shut down the economy. We would have, based off of, the past and what we've seen, we'd have $20 trillion that we would be able to play with in being able to provide economic relief to those people who are negatively impacted by the closing of the economy. But we don't have the ability to go $20 trillion in debt, or 10 trillion or even 5 trillion to deal with this. So our financial ability to respond to this has been limited. Why? Because Democrats, every time a Republican comes out there and says, hey, we need to reduce spending, come out there and go, draconian cuts. They never want to go through and actually engage in debate. Instead, they demonize their opponents, and then they claim that what they say and what they mean are completely separate issues. And of course, the Democrats, they're not focused on honesty here. They're not engaged in honest debate about the problems that we are facing and the available solutions, because they see an opportunity. Remember, never let a crisis go to waste, such as this clip.
Absolutely, we see this as an opportunity to reshape the way we do business and how we govern. And that shouldn't put shivers up the spines of, one party or the other. I think it's an opportunity anew for both parties to come together and meet this moment and really start to think more systemically, not situationally, not just about getting out of this moment, but more sustainably and systemically to consider where we can go together. This historic.
Yes. Because this is not about addressing the crisis. This is about creating, systematic change to our entire government, our entire way of living, our entire economy. Which is why they're not interested in an actual honest debate about how to handle this particular situation, because they're not focused on this situation. They're focused on fundamental transformation of the entire American society and our constitutional rights. And therefore, if you actually go through and try to limit debate to how to actually address the current crisis, that is unacceptable. That is outside the acceptable range of speech. They need to go through and actually, rebuild America from the ground up with totally different value systems and constitution. It is amazing how they do this. So we see this divergence here with where we started at in this particular video, where unfortunately they are being forced to agree with President Trump, but as they agree, they have to find a way to try and attack him and downplay their agreement with the America First and the need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. They need to try and downplay their agreement with that, being shocked because they can't fully admit that Trump was right on so many issues and that the Republicans were right on so many issues. So they have to constantly engage in transforming the debate and using straw man arguments. If you watched one of my previous videos, you would understand, what I'm talking about when it comes to how they suppress, speech and how they redefine words so that what you say and what they claim you mean can be different things. And so they need to be using this crisis to try and, go through and fundamentally transform everything in the economy. And so therefore, when they go through and admit Donald Trump was right, they have to try and find a way to not give so much credit to Donald Trump. It is amazing, though, that this situation has exposed that the left wing has been wrong about everything, and how Republicans and conservatives and President Trump has been right about so much. And it's really interesting to see, when you go back into the past, all the things Donald Trump had promoted that would have benefited us in this current crisis, and how the left had opposed every step of it since his inauguration. That is one of those really amazing things that we have seen here. That Trump almost seems like a prophet when he developed his campaign platform, and that the Democrats were always against it. Now, another interesting argument that the Democrats tried to make, how was Trump not prepared? How did he not have a team in place? And yet you can go back and you can take a look at the Democrats' actions installing confirmations, Senate confirmations of Trump's cabinet picks and, to fill various government vacancies. And so we see another situation in which the Democrats themselves have been denying the Senate confirmations, stalling, dragging them out to the point that it would take Trump well into his second term before he can fill every vacancy within the government needed, and especially critical vacancies. And then after they had spent all this time trying to stall and prevent Trump from getting his team into place, now come out and wonder, how is it that Trump didn't have the team needed to address this crisis?